There's an ancient fear wired deep inside us, not the dread of a magnificent predator, but of something alien, of something that creeps in the dark, a shimmer in the grass, a shadow in the corner. We call it instinct. But what if that instinct is a memory of other shadows, shadows that don't hide from us, but wait for us, in the wildest, most impenetrable places on the planet, where the mundane becomes unthinkable, where a creature we'd usually just step on grows to a size that can shove a human right off the path, where threads of silk can stop not just an insect, but something much, much bigger. And they wait, spinning their traps in the very cradle of darkness. Hey everyone, it's Fernando, with a brand new installment dedicated to cryptids and monsters. I'll be continuing this video series all week, just like before, taking your suggestions, which I gathered after putting the call out in my previous video asking you to leave them in a dedicated section. I picked up to 5 of the most interesting ones from there. This episode keeps the theme going of giant versions of, essentially, creepy crawlies and arthropods. A couple of weeks ago, in one of the videos, I talked about the deadly crawler, a giant centipede. Those are truly nightmare fuel creatures. In the comments, you rightly pointed out that critters like that are the stuff of actual nightmares. Now, we're going to talk about another cryptid that, as it turns out, is also a giant version of an insect, or rather, an arthropod, that we encounter almost daily. But this time, it's not a giant centipede, it's a colossal spider. The official name for this cryptid is J'ba Fofi. I hope I'm saying that right. It's spelled J'ba Fofi. However, its more common and traditional name is the Congolese Giant Spider. Essentially, to picture this creature, all you have to do is take your average house spider, the kind we see at home or out in nature every day, and just exponentially increase its size. The result is exactly this cryptid. It is genuinely terrifying. Honestly, the reason I specifically chose this cryptid for this episode comes down to the sheer abundance of stories associated with encounters with it. When you only have 1 or 2 such tales, it can seem like a fluke or pure fiction. But when you get 3, 4, 5, 6, and more, you end up with a situation where too many witnesses are claiming to have encountered this creature. It really makes you think that something like this truly exists. Unlike many other cryptids and monsters I've talked about before, this creature seems the most likely to actually be real. This ties into the concept that in nature, there can always be a larger version of already known species. Take fish, for example. You discover a big one, and a few months later, they find an even bigger one, then another, and so on. It's a rather intriguing pattern. So, where can you encounter the J'ba Fofi? This spider is reported to inhabit the Congo, and it seems this region is considered the sole home of this cryptid. The Congolese Giant Spider is described as an arthropod of quite formidable dimensions. The main accounts agree that its length, from the tip of one leg to the tip of the opposite leg when fully extended, measures between 4 and 6 feet. In other words, we're talking about a spider that's larger than most people. That's bone-chilling. The very thought that such a creature could be lurking in the forests of the Congo, scanning for any prey that passes beneath the canopy, ready to pounce down to inject its venom, paralyze its victim, or even kill it, and then wrap it in a cocoon for future consumption, either by itself or its offspring. That thought sends shivers down your spine. As I mentioned, there are numerous stories of encounters with this cryptid, and I'll share a few examples here. In George Eberhardt's Cryptozoology book, there's a case described involving an English couple traveling through the jungles near the Congo. Here's what they told him. which was recorded in the book. R.C. Floyd and his wife were driving in the Belgian Congo in 1938. 1938 isn't all that long ago, just last century, unlike some other cryptids that are said to have existed in the 13th, 14th centuries and earlier. So, in 1938, while driving through the Belgian Congo, they saw a large object on the road ahead of them. At first, they thought it was a cat or a monkey, but they soon realized they were looking at a spider whose legs were nearly 3 feet long. Pay attention to those last words. Legs nearly 3 feet. That means it wasn't the total length that was 3 feet, but each leg. Considering 2 legs in the body, we're talking about a creature they saw whose length was at least 6 feet. Another story happened in Papua New Guinea in 1942. An Australian soldier claimed he encountered a spider there the size of a small puppy, and this spider was weaving a web measuring 10 to 15 feet across. Apparently, he stumbled upon a J'ba Fofi that hadn't yet reached full maturity. Nevertheless, he immediately understood that he was facing something much larger than an ordinary spider. The creature looked underdeveloped, but it was already spinning a 15-foot web, the kind you hear about in the Congo region. By the way, speaking of the J'ba Fofi, we should mention its appearance. Generally, it has a pale yellow or almost white color. So, it's not a dark brown spider, but rather light-colored. Hatchlings emerging from the nests created by these creatures have bright yellow bodies and a purple abdomen. However, as they mature, these beings darken and turn brown. All this information comes from the indigenous people of the Congo regions, who seem to have extensive experience encountering this cryptid. Their knowledge is so great that they can identify the presence of a giant spider by the type of nest it creates. It's reported that the J'ba Fofi uses several types of shelters. Firstly, it can dig a burrow in the ground, a sort of underground cave. It creates a special entrance resembling a trapdoor, which is used for sudden ambush attacks, among other things. This kind of lifestyle actually exists in the real world. Some spider species in forests are known to build such camouflaged entrances where they lie in wait for prey. When a potential victim approaches, they suddenly fling open the trapdoor, shoot out their legs, grab the creature, and drag it into their lair. Another type of shelter for these spiders is inhabiting actual caves. They can occupy cavities in rock formations, creating their own small cave there, or use natural niches among fallen trees, dense thickets, anything that can serve as cover. Finally, the third type of dwelling for these cryptids is nests located high above the ground, right in the trees. This is an ideal spot to pounce down on unsuspecting prey below. Let's get back to other stories related to this cryptid. Let's move to Louisiana, United States, 1948. It's reported that a gentleman named William Sladen was walking with his grandchildren along Highway 171. Unlike the couple mentioned earlier, they were walking on foot, heading north towards a church. At one point, William noticed something in the foreground and told his grandchildren to stop. The reason was that all 3 of them saw and then heard a rustling in the bushes ahead. Immediately after, a giant spider appeared from the undergrowth and simply walked across the road. It was large enough to match the descriptions of spiders measuring 3 to 6 feet in length. The spider didn't attack them, and the gentleman and his grandchildren didn't make any moves either. They simply watched each other, after which the spider calmly crossed the road, disappeared into the bushes on the other side, and vanished. A very, very spooky encounter. Then let's jump to 2011. Filmmaker Richard Terry went apparently to the Amazon, specifically seeking out these giant spiders. There, He visited a village where they confirmed the existence of giant spiders known as J'ba Fofi. The local residents said they live in burrows right in the jungle and reach approximately 4 feet in diameter. Terry himself doesn't seem to have seen these spiders, but he definitely spoke to many villagers who shared numerous stories with him. Probably one of the most compelling stories is the testimony of another cryptozoologist named William J. Gibbons. He is actively searching for this creature, which I'm not sure how best to call a cryptid or a monster. After all, a cryptid is something far removed from animals known to science, while a monster is more likely just a giant version of an existing species. In any case, here's what Gibbons reported. He visited one of those villages and also heard from the indigenous people about their experiences. Here is his verbatim quote, which he shared upon his return. "During this, my third expedition to equatorial Africa, I took the opportunity to ask the pygmies if they knew of such a giant spider, and indeed, they did know. They spoke of the J'ba Fofi, which means to them giant or big spider. They describe a spider that is generally brown in color with a purple abdomen. They grow to be utterly enormous in size with a leg span of at least 5 feet, and they spin a layer of leaves resembling the shape of a traditional pygmy hut. They then weave a very strong, it is said, circular web between 2 trees, stretching the thread across an animal trail. These giant ground spiders prey on small forest antelopes, birds, and other small game, and are reported to be extremely dangerous, not to mention highly venomous. The females are reported to lay white peanut-sized eggs in a clutch, and the pygmies prefer to keep their distance when encountering them, although they have killed them in the past. They used to be everywhere, truly widespread back in the day. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to find one." Gibbons spills a lot of fascinating details. The idea that these spiders spin seriously tough webs makes total sense when you consider their absolutely monstrous size. They need silk that can actually hold on to bigger prey. If we're talking about snagging antelopes, birds, or other animals, maybe even some pretty sizable critters, that web has got to be strong enough to handle it. Otherwise, what's the point of hunting? And here's another wild twist. Regular spider eggs, the kind we're used to, tiny, like a grain of sand. But these behemoths, their eggs are the size of a peanut. That's a massive, massive difference. What's truly chilling to ponder is the thought that these spiders, by all accounts, used to be pretty common. They were often seen in the Congo, far more usual, more numerous. Now, they seem to have vanished, a truly rare sight. This could mean these cryptids, these monsters, are either on the verge of kicking the bucket, or maybe they just packed up and moved somewhere else. And hey, on the subject of giant spiders, when you stop and think about it, we've actually seen these nightmare fuel spiders pop up in movies. Just look at Lord of the Rings, Frodo and I think it was Sam? I forget the other guy's name. They ran headfirst into a massive spider queen. That scene was utterly, utterly terrifying. And then there's The Mist, that creepy movie that came out a few years back, based on the Stephen King novella. Remember that scene where the characters stumble upon a whole nest of giant spiders in the grocery store? Honestly, that might be one of the most gut-wrenching moments in any movie, because it shows these monstrous spiders laying their eggs right inside living people, not just somewhere nearby. Now, you might think that kind of horror could happen if you ran into a J'ba Fofi, but from the sounds of it, this cryptid just goes after smaller game and animals. So, has anyone out there had their own creepy run-in, heard any tales, or know anything else about this cryptid? If you do, seriously, drop your thoughts and comments down below. Again, this stuff is seriously bone-chilling, prime nightmare fuel. If you ever somehow cross paths with one of these things, all you can really do is run like hell or grab a giant stick, just whatever you can. But just imagine the absolute horror of the story if one of these creatures actually catches someone and turns them into the next meal, either for itself or its terrifying little babies. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there. Peace.